Welcome back. All right, welcome to the podcast, people. This week, I'm your host, Widied. This is your other host,
Pfarcus.
And we are the Aged Gamers. What's on the docket today?
Today we're going to talk about the future of gaming. What we think might happen, what we hope might happen, what we worry might happen in the future of the video game industry. We're going to talk about, basically, we're just going to conjecture like, oh hell.
We're going to dream up dreams, basically, you know, when we're too old to move and we're in the old people's homes. And what do we want to exist to, you know, get us through the days, the drudgery. And, you know, just kind of speculate, like, what kind of technologies might exist. As I adjust stuff, it's in my pocket. It's in my pocket. And, so every Mondays we do podcasts. Wednesdays we try to fit in a different kind of an idea, whether it be like a review or something. So if you're interested in that type of content, drop us a like.
Subscribe.
Leave a comment. Talk about whatever you want in the comment. I don't really care. And ring a bell if you want to see more content from us. If you want, you know, just to know what a couple of people are doing, talking about what we're saying, what we're not saying, whatever. Just click the buttons, people.
Except the dislike.
Except for that one. Yeah, just pretend that one doesn't exist. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Enjoy the show. Enjoy that show. Okay, we're back. All right, so let's set the stage here a little bit. Since we both expect to live to at least the ripe old age of
150.
At least, approximately that, we have to account for the fact that we might be immobile for at least 70 years of that. At least 70 of our extra years, we shall be, you know,
walker and cane. I'm kind of looking forward to having a cane so I can hit people with it, though.
That's like a side perk.
Yeah.
The first perk is that it helps you live life.
Yeah.
It kind of sucks the fact that you have to get there to you know, have some program. But like once you get that and you start whacking people, I'm sure it feels way better. Especially the youngins. The youngins always need it.
That's true.
If you have a little Timmy, just to set some straight.
That's true.
Helps with your berry picking too. If you want to go and pick some berries in a game, do it better with a cane. So yeah, like, I don't know, like one of this, so for those just tuning in to the show, all you new people, all you new wonderful people, this show is a little bit about video games. Actually, it's a whole lot about video games. But it's also a little bit about combating age in relation to video games.
Yeah.
How games can make aging easier. It's basically about existential dread and, you know, playing video games to ignore the fact that we're all going to die.
I mean, evil can't die. But, just, in terms of, like, growing up alongside of games and how we've matured along with the games, I'm assuming we've matured, and I'm assuming we will mature like a fine wine.
He assumes a lot.
You know what they say about assuming. It makes, anyways, don't think about it too hard.
Makes a good person.
Yes, that makes it.
Makes a good person out of you and I.
So yeah, but in terms of like, even in terms of like the things we've seen video games kind of grow up, I remember hearing a story about a kid that was playing Second Life. That story always kind of gets to me on an emotional level. It's this kid that was in a wheelchair all his life playing Second Life, and he commented about how it was his opportunity to walk with his friends. It was the only time he actually got a chance to walk with his friends. I thought that was really touching, and it kind of opened my eyes to the possibilities that gaming kind of offers. And I know not too many people might consider Second Life a game per se. It's more like a virtual hangout spot, but in theory, that, you know, my point still remains with games.
Yeah, and we pause for the obvious fact that food people have arrived.
A few moments later.
So, like I was saying, I think video games have a lot of possibility in terms of like giving people access to certain things. I remember even when journalists were saying that Sekiro was so hard that it kind of that people were like, well, what about the disabled community? I have to laugh because the disabled community kind of stood up to the challenge and they're like, don't speak for me. And then there's a whole bunch of...
They crack back.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of videos on YouTube with like specialty controllers for the disabled people, and they were just whooping. They were playing better than I was.
It's like anything else. They figure out ways to do it. Like there's so many... there's blind people that play video games. You're like, how the hell? Like, you know, but it's amazing, like that they can find joy and find ways to like, you know, do something and occupy their minds in this fashion. And that's what I think is really important part of this discussion is because like I think there comes a point in everybody's life where, you know, you're gonna face the Pied Piper. Or is that how the saying goes? No, the Pied Piper does something. Anyways, you face the Grim Reaper.
You won't die. Is what he's trying to say.
Yeah, I mean that's a really pleasant topic, don't you think? Like it's a uplifting. This is not depressing story at all. No. But you know, you gotta plan for these things, and I think like I don't know, like you've seen in other videos, we talked about Shirley Curry, and not to say that you know anything bad about her, but she's kind of a prime example of what I'm talking about.
I think she's like 90s.
She's in her 80s, I'm pretty sure. Way to just advance age person, jeez.
She's 7,000 years old.
But, yeah, she's found a way to use video games to occupy herself and keep herself busy. And also, I have to imagine it'd be somewhat liberating. You know, you're advancing at a certain age, you're losing certain mobility, you know, your energy is not like quite what it used to be. It must be nice to at least still be able to kind of almost go out on an adventure. Like, to me, that's important. I mean, I do it now, and technically I could do a real adventure. Am I? Probably not, but I'll stick to my video game adventures. I don't want to really face a zombie. I mean, that seems kind of sucky.
Brains, Brian.
Evil Dead, the friggin' co-op game coming out, I'm all about facing the zombies in that. That's going to be awesome.
So back on point. But one of the things that I think is kind of exciting is a lot of video game developers are trying to add different ways of addressing certain accessibility issues. Like you mentioned, blind gamers. There's quite a few games I've come across that are actually catered towards the blind gaming community. Games like Perception and a buddy of mine made a game. I forget what it's called, but it was a mobile game that was very sound based and even things like Last of Us 2 actually.
Had a lot of accessibility features. Yeah. It actually asks you as soon as you start. It's like wants to know if you need to use any or whatever. There's all kinds of different ways to activate different aspects because they really try to cover all their bases basically. Yeah,
which is nice.
Commendable, for sure.
And I think once my eyesight starts to go and my reflexes start to go and.
Arguably, some of that's already.
Who said that? But yeah, it's just nice to have that option, and I think that's one of the things that we'll see going forward more and more is ways to both integrate. I personally am excited about ways to integrate virtual reality because I think it's part of the fun of virtual reality is you get to go on adventures that you never could in real life. Like I can't swim, but I can go down and swim with the sharks, so to speak, and there's even a VR game I played where you can go down to the Titanic and just explore it, or you can fly off to the moon in the space missions, and these things that, okay, maybe I could do in theory, but like you said, am I going to? Probably not. One of the things I have to laugh about the Assassin's Creed games is you always kind of climb like Spider-Man in every last one. And,
parkour.
Yeah, and that's kind of fun because like if you're not necessarily like as mobile or if you're a lazy fat fudgesicle like I am, it's kind of nice to experience the joys of that without actually
that's
breaking.
What it's like to move.
That's what it's like to move without breaking your butt, because every time I move I break my butt. It's a true story. Happened to a friend of mine. But yeah, it's just kind of exciting to think of all the kind of the different kinds of experiences. So one of the things I find I'm kind of curious about, and we talked about this before, just before while we were planning this video, is I'm kind of excited to see what mixed reality I'm kind of surprised that hasn't taken off.
What is it?
Mixed
Oh,
reality.
like augmented reality.
Yeah, augmented reality. Some people call it mixed reality. Some people call it augmented reality. It's like VR, except you actually see the real world along with it. An example would be like Pokemon Go, where you can actually kind of see the real world, and there's a little target where the Pokemon is. I remember even there was an indie developer, that was working on a version of Quake where you could actually play Quake like in your living room, where like the monsters would come out from behind the couch and you had to shoot them, and it's kind of fun to have that mix of the world around you and video game. It kind of just, to me, it kind of adds to the experience, and I'm surprised that it hasn't picked up, and I'm kind of expecting it to in the future. I kind of expected it to already be here by now, but then again, when I was a kid, I assumed 2021 was the year that we would get flying cars and
that's what
and,
Back to the Future told us.
Yes.
So.
You lied to us, movies.
Marty McFly, you king liar. No, I agree. I feel like it is weird that hasn't sort of started to come to fruition a little bit, because, you know, there was a lot of like talk about it, and there's always seems to be at every wave of technology, people are like, yeah, so we're gonna get those glasses soon, right? The ones that, you know, do it. I think there's a lot of missed opportunity. Like, there's a lot of cool things that I read about back in the day when they were just talking about creating like these glasses that you could just look out and like it would start identifying things like in a very futuristic way. And then you know, people talked about video game applications of that, and like Pokemon Go is kind of like a weird baby step to that, but like imagine having a pair of glasses, you're just like, a Pokemon appears in the wild, and you're just like, well, go throw my ball or do whatever. There's all kinds of different things that could happen, and I actually feel like, personally, augmented reality is the safer VR, because VR has a lot of reactions, or it gives a lot of people bodily reactions. Like, I remember when I first took it, I was like, whoa. Like, I adjusted pretty well, I like to think, but like, there are times when I just was like, oh, gotta stop, put on the brakes, stop.
Yeah, well, for those who haven't tried VR, like, it actually, like, you could, it's this weird thing where it actually tricks your brain into thinking you're literally transported to another planet, and you kind of, like, you get a bit of vertigo with it, where like, you don't know where you can step. Your
height, like, if you have a fear of heights, it triggers, like, all of the bodily, and so augmentation is like that. It's like baby VR, where it's like, everybody could use it. It also would actually have crazy amounts of application. Like, I remember reading one article that was saying, like, picture this. You, like, walk into a room, or you walk into your garage, your car's broken, you have your glasses on, and it's, like, walking you through step by step. Like, okay, go to this part, replace
change
this.
An alternator or whatever.
And, or whatever. It's like, it's so close to being within reach. Like, even the article was talking about, like, how this technology is really not that far away. Like, it's really in the believable future, and I think it is pretty interesting. As you get older, it could play a role. Like, it could be something. Like, I feel like VR is probably a little bit more applicable when you get older, because I think, like, some of the things that slow you down are going to be like your mobility, and so maybe you're not really getting out into the world. I feel like augmented reality is a young man's game.
Yeah,
it's a young man's, like, to some degree. But it's still cool, and no matter what, I
can see it being an old man's game too, because I can imagine, like we were talking about the glasses, like, it'd be kind of cool to see, like, glasses where, like, if somebody has, like, Alzheimer's or something, where it has, like, recognizes faces and reminds them of their name, and a little caption of who they are. You could potentially kind of help out with that.
Well, I think there's, like, a really unending amount of application, like education. Yeah. I worry a little bit, like, how, like, you know, Elon Musk made a point of how, like, the phone attached to us is making us a bit of a cyborg, and I think that like augmented reality glasses that have some sort of like this phone technology into it and the ability to Wi-Fi into anything would be the next level. You're basically a cyborg at that point. It's just the implant isn't inside your skull. That's the next stage.
Sign me up for that.
And I do think there's some scary implications to stuff like that too, where, you know, the reliance on technology is scary to us right now. And we don't have that, right? Like, where with our other phones, it's like you and I, we joke sometimes. We'll be like, "Oh, let's go get something to eat." And we'll get halfway up the door, we're like, "Where's God?" And we're like, "Where's the phone?" We're panic. And I feel like there's like a false sense of reliance on it, because it's not like really the phone keeps you from living.
And I think one of the things that's interesting about I can speak good to me. one of the things I find interesting is that, with a lot of modern technology, it's kind of interesting watching a lot of this modern technology rise because, I remember day before all this stuff, and then I remember it kind of coming, and then when it caught on, and we're only kind of getting to the point with cell phones and social media and a lot of this new technology. It's kind of weird to think of it as new technology. It's kind of just always there now. But we're only kind of starting to learn its side effects, like the studies about how social media might make teens a little bit more depressed because everybody's posting the happy stuff.
Yeah, could you imagine if it was constantly popping up in front of you?
I think that's one of the things that people fear. I always used to think that fear was a little bit misguided, but I think it is a little bit legitimized by the fact that, and you and I have talked about this a lot about how there's nobody that kind of created these problems on purpose with social media. Don't get me wrong, there are some bad eggs in the technology world, and that's a whole other topic. But I think some of the bad things that technology brings is just kind of inevitable with the rise of anything new. I remember, and I mentioned this before on the channel, about how with the rise of the Gutenberg press, a lot of the people that were around were like, kids are just going to read books all day. They're not going to attach to the real world. Was there some validity to that? Maybe. There is the bookish guy that doesn't really know the real world. That is kind of a thing, right? And the same thing with technology. But I think as society matures and we kind of, as long as we're honest about the downsides, I don't foresee that being too much of a problem. The
downsides are pretty big. You even look I kind of cast a little bit of light on Shirley Curry because of her example of how she used technology. Because I think games are at a point now where they do already kind of offer something to people in that position, because there is a bit of these open world games almost have kind of a virtual reality feel to them, right? Where you're in the world, and it's an extended thing that's obviously exists outside of you. It's not really tricking your body, your hands, or any of your senses, but it does trick the mind.
Very much.
Where you get attached to the character. You very much. It's almost like watching a story, like watching a movie and controlling the movie. Which is just an extension of the imagination. That place is a wonderful place, and just seeing how her interact. But an interesting thing happened, and I'm going to tie it back to kind of your point about social media, is that probably, I want to say maybe last year, maybe the year before, but I think it was last year, she had a bit of a negative reaction to some of the attention she was getting through social media. Which you could logically say could be how it would be if you really put that much attention in people's minds at her age. And she really had issues where it was affecting her blood pressure, different things like that, because people were criticizing how she was playing, telling her what to play, and instead of just going along, they didn't, people, that's the weird thing about YouTube and because it's such an interactive forum, I think people just get carried away and think they can start, people are a-holes. Honestly, I actually laugh because there's a channel, Gaming Off the Grid, and they just incorporated a section into I've just started tuning in, actually. Good content, guys. But I just watched, and one of the things that they do that makes me laugh is they have a section called Boner Dog of the Month, where they take somebody... I like it, and I laugh at it, and it's not in jest of, there are some serious things that happen in their comment feeds where they get tortured by certain people. There are a-holes, and they just call out the a-hole in this feed. Yeah. They're like, this is what this dumb person did. Yeah. Here's for you, the world, to see this person being extremely dumb. And I have a lot of respect for that, actually, because I think dumb people need to be called out and need to be shown how dumb. They can't just be anonymously dumb and get away with it. So kudos, guys. I like that. I know that you're watching everything we do. So, it was really cool to see that, because I think you need to kind of start standing up. Because I think this is weird false intimacy thing that happens where people are like, oh, I'm with them.
You're my buddy. I can say this.
I can tell them they do everything wrong and that they're idiots. Or I can tell her that she should stop playing Skyrim and play. What if she just wants to play Skyrim? You're on her channel, not the other way around. And you don't have to watch her. That's the other thing, right? And so I don't know. I felt kind of bad for her in a sense because she was losing her love of gaming because what she liked doing was going in and creating adventures in Skyrim, as we've talked about before.
Well, I've noticed... there's kind of a little bit of a pushback towards some of the, and I usually don't like to use this term, but there is kind of like this weird toxic play-based thing that happens with a lot of online media in video games. And we talked a lot about how, like, when I tried to play League of Legends, it was kind of embarrassing how, like, I literally don't know how to play the game, so I'm not going to play it well because I just started playing the game. This is my first time playing the game.
It is a hard game, to be fair. Just
so
pick up and play.
Like, how am I supposed to know the mechanics when I'm literally learning as I go? And a lot of the people that are playing online are like, "Oh, this guy's so stupid, he's doing this." And it's like, of course I'm stupid in this game. I don't know how to play the game. That's why I'm a first-time player.
Yeah.
Right, and there's this, and it is like you said, like this weird false sense of intimacy. It's just this weird thing where anonymity definitely doesn't bring out the best in human nature.
No, it doesn't. It really, really doesn't. And so I'm on the side with that, and I don't feel like augmented reality glasses or any kind of cyborg implementation or whatever is ever going to make that easier. No. Whatever comes, better have a shut off social media button, because I don't want to see random people's thoughts popping up in my feed ever. I do not care. I love people interaction. Don't get me wrong, but I digest social media in bursts and then disappear.
Well, the way I usually describe it is I actually don't like people on a grand scale.
He likes you. Don't worry. He does like you. He likes you specifically, and you too. You're a little questionable. You're okay.
What I was going to say is I don't like people en masse. I like people individually. Because there's something about en masse where people kind of start turning off their brain when they're part of a group. And I feel like you get a little bit of that with gaming where when people feel like they're part of a community, they feel like they can get away with anything. It's kind of like the kid that's playing Halo that uses more swear words than I ever do. Kind of thing, and just gets online and thinks he can call everybody a penis, and then kind of does the little teabag thing to everybody every time he beats, and just the obnoxiousness of it all, right? Yeah. And I think there is a pushback. I think the gaming industry is aware that that's kind of an issue, and there's kind of I think calling it out and laughing at it and poking fun at it and ridiculing it.
Gaming, you have to do it right. I think you kind of have to. There's two kind of angles, and this is totally a side tangent, people. We will get back on track eventually. Maybe this is new talk now. We don't know. But my point is that I, in one way, I really like what they're doing, because I feel like people need to see how dumb people are to know that they're being dumb. And they deserve to be called out and ridiculed and made fun of. However, there's also by giving them attention, you know what I mean, is also feeding the monster. It's the sad thing about internet culture is that everything is moved and pushed by attention. It's not by merit. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's even if you look at the YouTube algorithm, oh Lord, YouTube, we praise, we worship you, come to us. If you look at it, it's not built around the merit of your stuff. It's not these guys put out great quality stuff. It's how sensational is.
Well, yeah, that's why you get that's why you get things like cat videos or videos of people the fail army kind of stuff.
Yeah, and
not that doesn't make me laugh, but
and thumbnails aren't really any giant artistic expression, except for ours. They're all beautiful. But yes, and but they're meant to just grab your attention, because it's basically video tabloid.
Well, there is even an expression.
That doesn't mean the content isn't. I don't get me wrong. The content be great, but everybody approaches it from that standpoint. And it's the same thing with online blog sites too, though. They're all the same thing. It's click me. That
was kind of my point in bringing up social media and that kind of culture is what's interesting is that we're starting to create terms like clickbait to describe this negative thing. Yeah. So I can imagine in the future, we're just getting more and more tools to combat it and to be aware of it and to be.
And then clickbait is becoming clickbait. Because it'd be
I'm not clickbait, it's clickbait.
I don't have big boobs. Not clickbait. Or not clickbait. Yeah.
I didn't eat too much today, did I?
I'm suddenly self-conscious. All right, how does this wrap back to...
Well, what we're talking about is the rise of technology and terminology and awareness of some of the negatives.
Yeah.
In terms of gaming, like a lot of that, I think. It started with little things like being able to ban somebody for being an a-hole. And in fairness to League of Legends, they do have like a really great system for that, for being able to report it, and moderators do look into like exactly what. And it's a pretty intuitive system, and I think that's kind of what happens when stuff is let to mature and actually is encouraged to mature. Is you get that kind of thing, and I'm kind of curious to see what happens in the next few years. Even think something like the rise of motion control and the rise of VR. I think part of that was especially with motion control. Like the original Wii was created specifically to combat obesity, because there's this weird thing that happens with video games where the same part of your brain that is active, like let's say when you play a sport, is still activated when you play like a sport video game. So what happens is a lot of kids feel like they're being productive on a physical level
when they're playing NHL 1998.
So to combat that, that's why Nintendo said, well, let's actually make it so that they're also making the motions.
Yeah. Trigger that as much as possible.
Yeah.
Nintendo's very on, and you know what's kind of interesting about Nintendo is that like, with the Wii, they did chase away a lot of their core gaming audience, but they brought in a lot of like the peripheral.
Yeah.
Like they were just like, everybody will know Nintendo. And by doing that, though, they brought in a lot of like older people into the mix, and they taught people, like those people, how to game and what it was like to game, and then what a game was. Like a game on Wii was totally different than what was coming out on Xbox and PlayStation.
Yeah, and I think it makes it a little bit more sociable, where like everybody's getting up and moving around, and then you can kind of laugh at each other, and
that might be another aspect of it too. And I mean, that people like as they get older, right? And you're sitting there and you're gaming, whatever you're doing, and then you have like a younger kid or a niece or a nephew or something. It gives kind of a relation there too, like a thing that you can do, because like you're gonna have limited actions when you get older, right, and stuff like that. And it could be just an easy way. Like I know a buddy of mine, Derail, I mentioned him a few times on this channel. We game a lot. Sadly, he mentioned about an older gentleman he used to play that just passed away recently due to COVID, actually. And but he was an older gentleman that they used to game with, and they got attached, and so like it's this way to feel like connected and be connected in a way that maybe your body can't. And like I guess this discussion really goes beyond just getting older, but for me that's like what like I'd like to get a grasp now while I can move.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, on how to keep ahead of the time, so that when I can't, I know what the strategy is going to be.
There's this one story, and keep in mind this was like a Facebook meme, so take it with a grain of salt. I don't know how accurate it is as an actual chain of events that actually happened, but it's just kind of an interesting story. There was a meme I had seen on Facebook that was basically this kid talking about how he used to play the original Xbox. There was a game that recorded. It was a racing game that recorded your racing and uploaded it as a ghost, that you could race against other players that played on that same game.
There's a few games that have done that since too. I think even like Mario Kart actually has a kind of a thing that does that in it. But
what was interesting is he said he played it with his dad, and his dad created a ghost car, and then his dad passed away, and he didn't think too much of it. But a couple years after, he started up the original Xbox, and he found his dad. Wow. He raced with his dad in the game. And
that's crazy.
There's even he even said that he didn't have the heart to beat his dad, because if he beat his dad, then the ghost would delete. That's
a pretty sweet story.
Yeah, and I would imagine the technology that's possible behind that could only get stronger as the future goes, and I would it'd be kind of exciting to see something like that. Like,
games do have an abnormal amount of power to even create a individual legacy. Like a lot of people. There's a lot of artists in the world that literally their whole mode or modus operandi to create art, or the whole willpower, or whatever the muse was, to defeat death or to defeat and by basically putting something out there that is like essentially you forever. You know what I mean? As far as time can go, or as far as society will hold on to it. Yeah. If you're Dr. Seuss, well, good luck. hot topic. But you know what I mean.
Well, I was even thinking something like Mario Maker, right? Like, if you make Mario Maker level, in theory, that's there
or
forever.
like
in theory, well, as long as there's
exactly as long as there's
servers.
your levels in existence, as long as the game's active, like you could potentially have. But like, there's so many individualistic ways to do that, and to have created something to keep sharing, and gaming is full of that. Like your example is perfect example. Like coming in and finding the game that your father loved to play, and then his action essentially. It's literally him. For all intents and purposes, it's almost like an imprint he's left in the universe that you can constantly always reference back. And I know it's small, but like to his son, it was probably huge, or his daughter, or whoever.
And to think of like what technology is possible tomorrow to record. I'm always excited about the idea of like, and I know this is not necessarily gaming per se, but I'm always interested in the idea of uploading consciousness, and because that's kind of to a degree.
This again. this guy here.
To a degree, that's what happened with the Xbox, if that story is true, right? Like, and don't get me wrong, it's not like full consciousness. Like, he can't talk to the car, obviously, but you know, the idea of
he talks to cars,
especially if they cut me off.
He gets really melody.
But like in a very minuscule way, that represents a recording of his father's consciousness, right?
Yeah, it's like an imprint. It's really what it feels like. Like it's almost like a mini treasure, and that's what it's actually a certain amount of beauty to that story. That I don't know if you could actually like you feel people that get it right, where they find like it's almost like the equivalent of somebody who lost somebody who finds a letter, that they left that they didn't know about, or something where you get like that piece of their being again, and it's actually pretty touching, to be honest, to know that games can do that. And I mean, now it's so crazy that like with Twitch streams and YouTube being a thing and all, you could leave a legacy no matter what. Like even as like, it doesn't mean that everybody's going to do it, because not everybody has the will or the whatever, but you can find your avenue for doing it if you look hard, like playing a race car game and leaving a track. Like there's so many ways, right? Videos of people, of your phone now, you have basically a camcorder on you at all times. Like,
well, even modern consoles, and this is what's kind of exciting. It's gonna be as modern consoles from the PS4 generation up. They started implementing upload features right out of the box. Like there's a button on the controller where you can upload your game to YouTube.
Sharing now has never been easier. Like,
and it's kind of exciting in that way, where it's like this little piece of what I'm enjoying I can send out into the world and kind of make a permanent stamp on it.
I feel like the stigma is what affects our generation from using it more than what they could. I feel like Shirley Curry, I'm just going to be talking about her a lot this episode, because she's been on my mind for reasons that you will know, probably because of an episode we just did. But I feel like she uses it in a way, because very specifically she's been asked about like what she thinks about the stigma, and she's like, it's ridiculous, if you want to game, you should be able to game no matter what age you are, and that she feels like it's changing, and I do agree with her, it is changing. But I do feel like a lot of people in our generation, or maybe just the ones before us, the baby boomers, whatever, those people, I feel like the stigma would still affect them from utilizing this technology as to its full potential for helping them. And but that's up to them. Like, it's not, we're not trying to say that, but they should keep an open mind, because there's a lot of cool things.
Well, I think part of the problem is it's kind of a catch-22, because part of the problem of opening everything up to society in a very public manner is that you always get the people that seem to spend their time wanting to tear things down more than build them up.
The boner dogs, TM, gaming off the grid.
Yes. I guess boner dog would be...
We're not stealing that, by the way. I'm just oding it. This episode I will ode it.
But I mean, like, I could see that coming from any sort of angle, like the kids saying, "Oh, okay, boomer," if they find out that somebody they're playing with is older, or the type of thing where it's like, oh, if you're over 30 and playing video games, what do you still live out in your parents' basement? And no offense for the viewers that still do live in their parents' basement. It's a legitimate place in today's economy, but you get my point where it's just like there's no matter what, there's always somebody that's like is willing to ridicule people. Like I remember,
always somebody being an a-hole, and you never realize it anymore in your life until you got social media.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, like there's always the high school kid that's like, oh, you wear glasses that makes you 4 eyes. It's like, well, or I want to see. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, the interesting part about that too is like, yeah, or I want to say, that's like a good point. But it's kind of reminds me of like when they tell people like that they should be playing, like they go on somebody else's channel. Let's say, like what they don't realize is people that are making content are doing content for you. Yes, I mean, but it is also for them too. Like there's a part of themselves there, and so you can't just go on to go down and be like, you can go on and say, hey, it'd be cool if you check this out, but don't harass people and like your thoughts will never matter that much. Sorry, like they do, and I think people will be like, you know, everybody's very thankful when people tune in and they're nice and stuff like that. But you know, nobody's thankful for an a-hole. Like, not one person. So
don't Karen is what.
Don't be a Karen. Don't be an internet Karen. Be an internet, whatever.
Or the anti-Karen.
Anti-Karen, yeah.
But yeah, it's just kind of interesting to see the different ways because this is how old we are. I remember the days before YouTube when, you know, watching that technology rise was exciting. Like now that the internet was actually getting to the point where we can share our lives in that way.
You want to know something funny? The YouTube, like I don't actually remember stages of YouTube. I remember not paying attention to it at all, and then all of a sudden, YouTube. I literally, because like that's what's funny about people. Like I think that's a really big difference of people from a younger age than us. Like this cancel culture and all this other stuff that exists. And wow, we are totally going down weird, crazy avenues. But they attack people. And it makes me laugh because so recently a bunch of people were like, we hate Eminem, let's tag him. Like, they don't know who Eminem is.
Well, they clearly don't.
You just made him a bunch of money because he's going to give you the big middle finger and make a bunch of it. So
yeah, well, for anybody who doesn't know who Eminem is, he's a guy who rose to fame by constantly being offensive on purpose and then laughing at the people who got offended. Yes. That's his entire career.
You're just making him more money. You gotta live life better. Anyways, and pick, you know.
But that's a bit of a digression. Well, and I think that kind of gatekeeper mentality of and there'll always be morons, and that's kind of what I mean when I say that I don't like people. I like people on an individual level, because when people speak to you on a 1-to-1 sort of level, they usually like nobody's going up to Shirley Curry's face and being like, don't play this.
That's the whole point, right? Like, and you'll see a lot of people on other channels and other people on just in media in general be like, come say that to my face. You won't. But you know they won't because most of them are just cowards. And I'm not saying that to be mean to people in general and whatever, but like, just... I think the pendulum is swinging back into normalcy where people's like... You're starting to like gauge it, and I think because it does have a negative impact, like on people's enjoyment of technology.
And it does, and I think that's one of the reasons I mentioned that because the original topic was talking about the future of gaming, and we kind of gone off the rails a little bit, but
tiny little bit.
But part of it is. You know, we can't have the future without dealing with the problems that we're facing now. So it's kind of exciting that there is kind of...
Good way. That was tight. That was great. Yeah.
But we, you know, it's kind of exciting to see people have more and more ways to fight back against these problems because then that means, okay, now once we've gotten to the point where we solve these problems, we can get to the next step, the next evolution, the next...
Yeah, well, that's a good point because like with the example of Shirley having the blood pressure issues, like... That's a very counterintuitive thing for an older person that they shouldn't really have to experience. Yeah. They're just literally putting their story out there, having fun. And why is she suddenly worrying about what people think? And that kind of ties back to the whole like criticism. I said you can kind of have to ignore that, or you can take two roads to try to take them on or ignore them. Personally, I'm old enough to remember what life was like before social media, so ignoring them is really easy for me. Yeah. Like just ignoring Facebook, ignoring Twitter, and it's actually to the opposite where I have to remind myself to use those things.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Except for YouTube. We love YouTube. I use YouTube
I'm
a
very
lot though.
addicted
I
to
do watch YouTube stuff all the time. It's like the one that I feel is the most productive of all things, because like even the act of watching other people's streams, big and small, it feels more connected. The conversations feel really like Twitter.
I think, and I've said this before,
Facebook,
and this is one of the things that does kind of excite me about these kind of mediums, even like Twitch and mediums like that, is,
Twitch is a good one too, yeah. We don't use it, but it might in the future because it's cool.
Possibly. But one of the things I think that works better than many other forms of social media is, it's not really like, let's say, Facebook and Twitter, where you say something and then 10 random people can comment on it that are not even a part of your circle. It's just it's like, I think this, and then some random guy is like, I don't know, it's like having a conversation in a coffee shop, and then some random person just walks up to you and says, I think you're wrong.
Yeah, but it's that false level of that false sense of, like, what is it? False sense of intimacy that, like, the social media creates, that, like there's this weird feeling, like, especially when you first get on it, where your impulse is to be like, screw you, hippie,
or whatever.
Makes it worse. But it's like, but then, like, it's just two people yelling, and you just keep saying, "Hey, listen," all the time.
Hey, listen.
And that's actually accurate. But you don't. I think there's people actually literally get trapped in that mode too, where like they just, they don't even realize that what they're doing is nonsensical. Like, you would never just start an argument with a random person for no reason, and then like carry on and then be hurt and then be trying to figure it out. There's no reason to ever do that. It makes no sense logically. They don't owe you anything. You don't owe them anything. You don't know them. They don't know you. You can't argue with them because they have no care other than to prove themselves right. And vice versa. It's different than if you and I have a conversation. I like you as a person, you like me as a person, hopefully. And we will try to make ends meet. We'll try to, like, find the brittle ground. We'll try to find the bridge. That's what a conversation actually is, people. And you're not going to get that on Facebook. You're not going to get that even on Twitter. You're just going to get a bunch of idiots yelling at each other. Hey, listen, and that's why Zelda is still good to this day. There will be an infinite amount of times that that's referenceable. They knew what was coming. All these tiny little fairies running around going, hey, listen. And somehow we'll put that in the video as well.
And hey, look, listen, watch out, look, listen, watch out.
I don't know if she's watching our video. I'm hoping she does. But if Shirley Curry's watching this video, I would just recommend ignoring the comments, because the weird thing about YouTube comments is,
that's literally what she does, by the way. Not to, like, she's like, she takes a break, essentially.
You get two types of comments on YouTube. And don't get me wrong, there is the productive kind of conversation where people are actually trying to engage with the material. And then you'll always just get the trolls that are just like, I think you're stupid.
Harvey. He's never made it this far in any video in his entire life.
You're right.
And I'm going to give him the most credit now.
I'm going
to give him the most star now because I know he'll never get it. And it'll be hilarious. But Harvey, this one's for you, bud.
But you always get the trolls that are they're just waiting. They're basically, and I mentioned this with our friend. there's this, and again, I'm not going to edit this out. There's this moment where the troll just says, "This is a comment," and that's their comment. Like, that's the kind of the gist of their comment. And that's kind of the best case scenario with a troll, because sometimes I've heard of cases where they're downright
nasty.
Death threats. And
if you, like, listen to the Gaming Off the Grid guys and some of the stuff that they bring up, it is actually mean. Like, the last one I watched, which I think was one of their newer videos, they talk about, like, some guy was getting nasty to one of them, and the other guy was, like, kind of like, you don't talk crap with my friend, I'll beat the shit out of you. Proper response, by the way. But, like, it's kind of true. Like, it can get way darker, and I feel like there's just people that are just like, I want to see how far I can push this. There's no incentive for them not to. Like, think about it. They don't know you. You don't know them. It's not like you can go to their house and prove them wrong. So they know that, and that's what's terrible about this whole situation. But the the thing is, though, what's cool about calling them out is, I think, to some degree, I don't think I have the willpower to do that. I'm definitely much more on board with the ignoring, but I always applaud the people that do and have the energy to fight with them, because, like, I do think by doing that, you do lend basically a helping hand to people that struggle with maybe even acknowledging it. Like, I feel like Shirley, like, if you follow, like, what her commentary was about the people that were harassing her, basically, was that she couldn't help it but feel attached to trying to fix the problem, and then that, of course, taxed her in the end and got her worn down, and to the point where she was not even enjoying the games and the things that she was doing. And it's so not fair to her, but, like, I think by knowing it also happens to other people, and maybe by seeing people stand up for themselves, you get some strength in that. And so I have respect for that, and I do.
Well, and one of the things that I think is kind of both ignorant in that case, but exciting in another case, is that, you know, the fun thing about video games, and we've talked about this quite a few times on the channel, is that they're not just one type of experience. There are many different types of
Typesises. Oh, typesises. My typesises.
They're all different types of experiences.
It's mine.
You know, you can have like the Doom Eternal typesises, where you're fighting for your life and very high challenge. Or you can have
pace.
high pace, high octane, high everything. Or you can have like the VR experiences where you're just going through the Titanic, and like that's not even necessarily something you have to beat. It's just something you experience,
Complete with the puke feelings.
if it's the right VR game. Yes. And so the idea of telling people like this is how you have to play is a bit,
Especially on their medium. I think people forget that
yeah.
YouTube is still an art form.
Yeah.
Like, there is still an expression. It's not... It is... Like, what's neat about it, and this is the beauty of it, is that it is a very interactive, and like we talked, there's good and bad parts of the false intimacy that it creates.
Yeah.
Like, you can actually get real friends out of it. You can.
Yeah.
You can meet people that... Especially two sensible people that are trying to make a meaningful conversation happen. You can have it. It's just there's a ton of people who don't. And I would say... the majority is not in the favor of people trying to have meaningful conversations. It's actually like, 10%, 90%. And, if you're trying to have a meaningful conversation on the 10%, sorry. But, it happens. But it also, with the channels specifically, and hopefully, we have the benefit of, not being monetized. We'll say whatever the heck we want. We don't care. But hopefully people, what they do is like, you create a meaningful relationship with your audience, and so sensible people come to you and they know what to expect. They know like what's true about bad people. We'll say bad people in general is that they kind of know who to exploit. They kind of like know who to pick on because you can sense it. They can sense it. They know if I poke that person, I'll get a reaction, and if I get a reaction, I'll get another reaction, and then I'll get the other reaction.
Well, that's one of the negative things about, and I do think again one of the exciting things is that we're starting to get the terminology and the awareness of these things, these problems, so they will eventually be solved, and I do have faith in that. But one of the interesting things is, and me and you have talked about this a lot, about how there's this weird thing with a lot of social media algorithms now, where if you're literally commenting because something made you angry, the algorithm doesn't know that's a negative experience for you. It just knows that it's something you interacted with. So they'll just send you more things that make you angry.
Could you imagine if it was augmented into you? Like, here's an example. So I love dogs. And so this is why I hate Facebook. I love dogs. So one day I was on Facebook and I was liking dog things. And then it started sending me articles about horrible things that were done to dog and dog cruelty. And I was like, oh, I hate, stop sending me. But it doesn't ever. And so I was like, okay, I'm done with you. Screw you.
Yeah, because if you commented, oh my God, that's horrible.
It's like, oh, it likes this. And it's like,
send more stuff.
And it's not that I want to live in a world where I don't know what's happening, but I don't want to see it every day, like every moment. And that's where, like, what people don't realize is Facebook's like a gnat. It's like creeping inside your mind, just going beep, 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 and all the time trying to get your attention. And so, like, it can be wonderful in terms of information. It can also be the worst thing ever. In terms of, like,
and I think we're starting to be more aware of the
nightmares.
worst thing ever part of it.
We are, because there were documentaries about stuff, like there was one on Netflix about
The Social Dilemma,
which was cool. I really liked the general vibe of that, and I think we definitely need a lot more attention. But there's tons of TED Talks about how, like, people need to stop, like, put down, get rid of Facebook, get rid of, like, these Twitter ones, the ones that are trying to connect you to, or take the notifications off, do something. But, like, you gotta scale it back to get to a normal life. And what's interesting for people like us, and I think gives us an advantage of being in two worlds, of being these old gamer guys, is that we remember what it was like before all this stuff. Like, we remember playing games when you had to, like, go find out about anything from a magazine.
Nintendo Power. I remember multiplayer meant you called your friends and be like, hey, do you want to come over and play Street Fighter? Or whatever. Yeah. And that was multiplayer.
And when you had gaming booklets, instead of having a phone in the washroom, you had to take your little gaming booklet of the game that you just got, or maybe one that you had, like, for years.
We were beating games before Google. We couldn't Google stuff. Because Googling wasn't a thing.
It just wasn't a thing. And so, like, that detachment, though, kind of gives us a specific advantage, I feel, because I feel if you're born in it, you don't know how to disconnect. And that's a lot of the TED Talky stuff talks about, too, where it's like, you know, they don't have the experience to say enough's enough because it's their norm.
But that's what excites me, though, is to see, like, it's not like these problems people aren't aware of these problems. And maybe some people aren't. But more and more people are getting aware of these problems.
I feel like you can control it.
Yeah. Because I think, and the reason I keep on harping on this point is because I think a lot of people's hesitance towards newer technology, especially with mixed reality, is a lot of people, and I remember early in the days of mixed reality, people were very scared with when the Google glasses came out. They're like, oh, well, stalkers now can just look at me and know who I am and know my Facebook page. And part of that is, you know, the discussion of internet safety. And I hope that's a discussion that people are having where, you know, you got to be careful of what information you put out online. You know, not that this is a very fun topic, but even I've heard stories of like child predators that can tell where the children are from their Snapchat photos, like the background of their photos or whatever. So you got to be careful and you have to be aware of that stuff.
Yeah, makes sense to be.
And that's why it does excite me that we're having these conversations more and more often about these kind of things, because when the problem gets solved, then we can evolve to the next step.
Yeah.
And see what happens next. And I think we're at the point now where like a lot of the people's concerns about what kind of information would be out there with the Google glasses, I think it's actually kind of almost, I don't want to say solved per se, and I do think some of these problems might carry over, but I think for the most part we've kind of solved some of the bigger problems. Again, when, you know, we grew up before time of YouTube, and now YouTube's around, and look how much of a presence it is.
Well, it's insane, right? Like,
so what is the next thing? And that's what kind of excites me. Is like, what is the next thing?
I actually feel like YouTube's one of the awesomer avenues of it, because like it has a dislike feature. Like honestly, like Facebook would be good if it wasn't just trying to get you to like everything all the time. But the fact that it's clearly an algorithm built on slot machines, like it only wants to eat your attention. Facebook is actually super dangerous in my opinion. But I don't think like YouTube is. YouTube does do algorithmic things, does try to figure out who you are to give you videos. But there's a downvote. And it's at least trying to entertain you, and it's trying to force get you in, and you could accidentally stop on like but I've never gotten in a fight with a YouTube video yet, not once. I mean, I've watched ones I didn't agree with, obviously. But
you just go to another video.
You go to another video, or you stop. Like I've never so that it's more of a conversation, which I think is healthy. Whereas like all these other ones, they just you hear people they're getting fired for a tweet, and it's like what? Okay, a tweet. Okay, if that can happen, Twitter should just not exist in my opinion, because it's nonsense. It's basically an avenue for nonsense, and people are like, it can be held accountable for nonsense in a sphere of nothing.
One of the things that I think of when I think of YouTube is, again, that conversation of like, what if we're having a conversation in a coffee shop? And like I said, Facebook is a little bit like anybody just walk up and be like, I think you're wrong, from apropos of nothing. I think YouTube is a little bit like we actually have the conversation. And I think anybody who goes to coffee shops a lot has had this experience where you're just kind of doing your own thing, and then like for an example, I was at a coffee shop one day and somebody came over and said, "Oh, I really like that tattoo." It was an older lady, and I really
the pinhead.
Yeah, the pinhead one.
Yeah, I figured that's the one she liked.
Yeah, it actually was the pinhead one,
cool.
And she's like, "Oh, it's really cool. It's colorful."
Reminds me of the doll I had once. You're like, no.
But it was just.
What sites I shall show you, or what sites.
But we just had this conversation, a little conversation. It was just a little social moment that was kind of nice, and it was respectful, and it wasn't in the middle of a conversation.
Sure, it wasn't
I had
the
with
bear,
somebody.
And then you just thought it was.
I can't remember.
Yeah,
it might have. I don't know.
Maybe she liked you calling her Puto, and she's like, "I'm done."
Which in Latin means something different than what you might think. In Latin, it means computation. I consider, but anyways.
Cool.
But yeah, and I think YouTube, the technology is built in a way that it's more like that kind of thing, where it's like, oh, by the way, I like your hat or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of exciting because I feel like YouTube's just the start of that kind of experience and what's possible with technology. It's kind of interesting to see, and even YouTube itself kind of evolved and then kind of had offshoots like Twitch, which is very specifically gaming oriented, and very specific to that kind of experience. And it's much
more raw, but it's like still kind of interactive in the same way.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting to see what new technology will come out after, especially in terms of gaming. Like one of the things that's kind of, I think, like I know we make fun of Cyberpunk, but one of the things I thought was kind of interesting is that the developers, one of the intentions that the developers had was actually to make their video game YouTube friendly. So they had this feature where you could actually, I haven't seen it implemented, and maybe this just got.
Oh, I've seen.
But they have a feature where you can kind of make it YouTube friendly. So you set this feature that you're going to play the game on a Let's Play or whatever, and it'll take out copyright music.
Yeah.
It'll take out anything that might
That's really clever.
get you a strike.
Yeah.
Which I think is nice.
How deep does that go, by the way? That's another conversation. We'll talk about that later.
Well, yeah, and it's just this you're seeing this multi-integrated thing, and it's kind of interesting to wonder what'll happen next. Like I remember even the rise of the smartphone, and it's kind of interesting to think of how much technology we have in our pocket. Like there's one.
Oh, it's insane.
There's one statistic, one article I read that talked about how the CPU power in your pocket in your cell phone is something like 10 times more advanced than what took us to the moon. So you're thinking of that, you have a computer in your pocket that is 10 times more powerful than the computers that took us to the moon. Like what's actually possible?
Pretty insane.
It is pretty insane. And we usually use it to look up cat videos on the pooper. But feels like a little bit of wasted potential. But
Or watch Widied and Pfarcus Age of Gamers talk about
don't ever stop doing
being
that.
old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is the next technology, the next big thing?
Well, I don't know, but I think like honestly, like it's hard. It's easy to say, okay, when I get old, I want to be hooked up to a VR machine that I feel everything and I have sensations. But I'm actually kind of afraid if that happens, I'm gonna give me a heart attack or something. You know? So I actually kind of feel like games are in a really good spot right now for like honestly, I know we personally crap on like Skyrim a lot, but like those open world games do give a lot of like breadth of.
Well, we've had an interesting conversation one time about the PS5 and the Series X before it came out about how games aren't really making, and this is not necessarily negative. It sounds negative at first, but it's not necessarily negative. The games aren't making huge leaps like the SNES to the N64. For those who don't know, the SNES was little cartoony sprites. Then the N64 was
3D cartoony sprites.
and then the N64 was kind of the first true 3D machine. And now, like the difference between the PS4 and the PS5 is a lot less of a jump.
Yeah,
it's more of a refinement.
Incremental.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where video games are now, where it's kind of interesting to see, because I think that like if you looked at the video games of tomorrow versus the video games 20 years down the road, I think you will see an interesting leap in technology. That's kind of what I'm trying to picture, because I think every step in between is going to be little increments where it's just adding little things.
I think now we're at that point where, it's less about, because we had so much to discover at the beginning. You had your 8-bit to 16-bit to 32-bit to what we see now.
64-bit, yeah.
And I think now it's all like very much from last gen to this gen felt like quality of life stuff. Honestly, more than anything, and I do think that's a big deal, but it isn't really a big deal in terms of the games that you're playing. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
well, I think it is in subtle ways. Like we talked a lot about how the Switch changed the way we played video games. Yeah, because it's just a very subtle change in something that you can dock in and out of.
That's actually a good point too about how that affects like being older, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you're older, you're not capable of like comfortably sitting in a couch for X amount of hours, or even a bony old chair,
or whatever.
Or whatever. You take your Switch with you wherever you can be, and it's always an avenue. Like I personally always thought the Switch was a fantastic adult machine. Like it's Nintendo's ode to the 30-somethings that have stayed with them all the years. Because like to me, having a Switch means more to an adult than it does to a youth. Even though I feel like I see a lot of youths with it, the youths. But I also see a fair amount of adults.
Well, I think that's the next changes we'll see in the next few years are things like the PS5 VR not having a cord, for example, which actually would kind of open up a lot of potential in terms of like, because the PSVR is really good, but you always have this cord dangling on the side that kind of knocks you out of the illusion. It'd be kind of interesting to see how that feels without a cord. Not that there's no such thing as VR without a cord now. You have the Oculus Rift, I think it is, One of the Oculuses. Oculies. There's one that is self-contained that doesn't have cords. I don't know what it's called.
It's not called the PS4 VSR or VR.
PSVR, yeah.
PSVR thing, because that has too many cords.
Yeah, it has like a bajillion cords.
You feel like you're in the Matrix and they put the thing
you do actually feel like that a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see like those little changes, and I think that's what we're going to get for the next like 10, 15 years are a lot of those little changes that we might not even realize what they'll change until we actually see them. Kind of like the Switch, where it's like it was a little bit of a shock to the system, like how different gaming on the Switch is.
So I think honestly, for me, the future of gaming is a lot more about the incremental things, as you were kind of hinting at. I think like I would like to see, more dockable, hardcore gaming systems. Like even a PlayStation. Like I know they can't really rip off the Nintendo, but it's kind of already happened to a certain extent. Where I was telling Pfarcus when we first got our next gen systems and current gen now, that they made like at first we didn't really know this. We went into it kind of blind, and we just got them because they were there. We were able to get them right fast. Yeah. But like I was sold on the Switch because you could take it wherever you want, but the other two made it so that you can basically play off of your phone, and especially if you're in the same household as your phone. It's pretty seamless. Like it worked. I played at your house and I didn't have any downtime, or lag. So like they are making it already pretty compatible for anybody to just play these things wherever and whenever, and it's starting to already get to the future a little bit in my mind. Like there's not much more futuristic that you can get for these games, except like you play a game like God of War. I don't know if I could have felt more God of War, more like Kratos, unless they put me in a Kratos suit that I can control. And then I could start breaking everything. Like that's the only way to get it much further. It felt pretty darn good. Like, and all those new games really do. Like, but the reason why I mention these games is that they're very immersive and they pull you in. I don't think you get much better than that in our current.
So that's what I was trying to bring up with accessibilities. I think that's kind of where the future is going. Is just these different ways of playing a game that opens up a lot more avenues and just makes it more immersive and even maybe just more accessible to people of varying abilities. And in fairness, that's been going on for a while now. Like you have like Microsoft's accessibility controller, and like we talked about games for the blind, and
Last of Us 2 doing a bunch of extra special stuff.
And I think that's what's kind of exciting is I feel like we're at a point where gaming is kind of growing up with us to the point where like as we start to degrade,
you're getting gaming's got your back. They're starting to build your walker.
It's kind of what's going on, right? Is that they're kind of going right by our side,
which is actually kind of true of the whole medium in general. If you think about it, we've talked oftentimes about how like we personally, because we are around the same age, that we felt honestly like gaming grew up with us, and like, you see it so evidently in games like God of War, where when Kratos was doing crazy youthful shit, that was in the peak of our young adulthood, and then now he's a father. He's more mature in his whole take, and his whole story is more sophisticated and interesting, especially to an adult sensibility, that it feels like very much like that grew up with me.
Well, it's funny because you look at the game God of War, the original series, and then the new God of War. Like the God of War original series, every one of them had like the little sex side game where you come across like naked ladies and you pressed a button to like boink them and kind of thing.
And then this one, your wife's dead.
Yeah, so it's like the level of seriousness is like whoa.
It's up the ante like 12 billion times. It's just, it was really nice to see that, and it was what I wanted, because I don't think if Kratos never matured, I don't think I would have liked.
I think we would have grown out of it.
I would have just passed it by, because it's good for things to evolve, and I think that's kind of the important thing, and kind of the almost overarching message of this whole show is that things do need to evolve to get to the next level. Even social media, and we might be mired in the crap for so long.
We're getting out of it. I think we're starting to get out of it. That's the interesting thing.
There has to be a breakthrough, and it'll come. It comes with everything. Eventually, people will be so tired of nonsense that.
And the evolution our audience members
is watching our
hit like, comment, and subscribe.
Like, comment,
share
subscribe
us
in that order, and then hit a bell. And that is the evolution of things. You've pretty much achieved peak humanity once you've done these.
Yes.
I don't think your contributions get much better, but we do certainly appreciate it. But yeah, just to wrap this up, I think we are getting to a place where we are almost in the future, especially for getting old. Like people, it's like we're kind of lucky. I feel like, but we're also the generation carrying it on our backs a little bit. So I'm not going to say it isn't. It's like people that grew up around the same times we did that are thinking about these things because, we're in the same situation. We're getting older. How do we continue to game? We're getting older. What does that look like? We're not 8 years old and playing Mario in the basement anymore. We're not. There's children in the mix. There's, whatever
responsibilities or whatever.
Yeah, there's illness and injury and all these serious things that life puts in front of you, regardless of choice.
Yeah.
And I think gaming has got your back. That's like the moral. I think honestly, I am always encouraged, even by Shirley Curry. I know I talked a lot about how like her story kind of took a sad little dip last year, but I think she's even climbing back. Like I think she's getting back to her old energy levels of enjoying it again from what I've been able to gather. She's found other avenues or ways to manage the insanity, and I think that's part of it is to know. I think once you first get thrust into these things, it feels scary and it feels intimidating. But then you just remember what it was like to not have it, and it's like, okay, that's easy.
Yeah.
It's just like anything you haven't had before, right? Like it's just it's easy to get over that challenge. That's why I always laughed. Why I laughed about the M&M thing. It's like, okay. You gotta try to take something from a guy who doesn't give a crap. Like, good luck.
Not only that, has made a career out of not giving a crap.
Good luck. It's just interesting. Anyways, that's my point. Is things should the pendulum doth swingeth, and I think it's coming back into a reasonable place where things are going to start making sense again, and
then we can move forward.
And technology will make more sense than it does now, and things should look up for aging and technology and gaming in general. Just it already is. Like it's already getting in a good spot, and I just think we're lucky in a lot of ways to be in the age of what we are, and like topics like retro gaming and stuff like that, and gaming in general. Like we have so much to choose from.
Yeah.
So much choice.
We
Too
can
much
look back.
choice.
We can look forward.
We can do whatever. Like it's insane the amount of options that exist, and there's some people that maybe they just want to literally relive their childhood, and you can. There's so many ways to do that. Like there's and then you like. You can chase all these new experiences. There's just the sky is the limit, and
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
It's all true.
It's all true. So on that note,
drop us a like if you like this kind of content. If you like rambly old men talking about crazy stuff. Sometimes linking it back to video games. Sometimes going off in tangents like we do. And leave a comment if you think what we said is ridiculous. Like we've already established, we may or we may not pay attention. We'll pay attention to the ones we like.
Yes.
And subscribe. That's important. That's the other important thing. The bell.
Ring the bell. Ring the
bell. Bell. Bell.
And on that note.